I met Margaret almost 4 years ago. At the time, I had just moved to this quiet little town in the outskirts of Oregon, searching for some peace after retirement. The first neighbor I met was her, a tall, slender woman with silver hair who had the habit of sipping tea every afternoon on her back porch. At first, we just waved at each other over the fence, but slowly, thanks to her offering me some homemade cookies and me returning the favor with coffee, we began chatting like two old friends. I still remember clearly the first time Margaret told me about her early retirement days. She used to be a nurse, 35 years working in a hospital, used to the sound of emergency bells, overnight shifts, and a pace of life that moved as fast as a racing heartbeat. And then, just a few months after hanging up her retired sign, her husband John passed away suddenly from a stroke. No one saw it coming. And Margaret, who had spent her life taking care of others, suddenly found herself in need of care with no one there beside her. I've never seen anyone speak about loneliness as calmly as she did. No crying, no complaining, just a faraway gaze and a quiet sentence. "You know, this house used to feel warm. Now it's cold even in summer." Margaret's daughter lives all the way in Chicago. Her son's in Denver, both with their own families. They love her, and she loves them, but modern life and distance mean that most visits happen through phone screens now. They text, we video chat, she said with a bittersweet smile, but it doesn't quite replace a real hug. She shared that after John passed, she felt completely lost. She would wake up early but not know what to do, go to the store and forget why she even went, eat dinner alone, and everything tasted bland. I imagined Margaret, this woman who had once been strong in the operating room, who handled emergencies by instinct, now struggling to find a reason just to keep going. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror and asked, "Who am I now? I'm no longer a nurse. I'm no longer a wife. And my kids don't really need me the same way anymore." She said it so evenly, but I could feel it deep inside her. There must have been a vast, quiet emptiness. One afternoon, I saw her sitting in her rocking chair out back. Sunlight was brushing across her wispy grey hair. A cooling cup of tea rested in her hands. Her eyes weren't focused on anything. I was about to walk over and say hello, but I stopped, because in that moment, I felt Margaret wasn't listening to anything outside. She was hearing something within. And sure enough, she told me later. That day, I realized I'd spent so much of my life living for others, I didn't even know what living for myself meant anymore. I'd never stopped, never listened to what I wanted. If I was tired, if I was sad. I truly believe that was the turning point, when a woman over 60, who had already lived through life's ups and downs, began a completely new journey. A journey inward, not with big travel plans or ambitious projects, but with one small question. If I'm still alive, how can I live in a way that feels meaningful? I don't know how this story will sound to you, but for me, just someone watching from the sidelines, it was one of the most powerful awakenings a person can experience. Margaret didn't change overnight. There was no moment where she suddenly sat up in bed and said, "I have to change my life." No. For her, everything began with the tiniest things, so small that she didn't even realize they marked the beginning. One autumn morning, I saw her out in the garden, cutting lavender. It was John who used to take care of that plant. I teased her, planning to cook something romantic. She laughed, didn't answer, just said, "I just want the house to smell nice. Living alone, it should still feel a little fragrant, don't you think?" It was the first time in months I saw something in her eyes, like a ray of sun slipping through thick clouds. Not much, but warm. The next day, she brought me a small book, Mindfulness in Everyday Life, by a Vietnamese Zen teacher. I stumbled upon it at the library. It's lovely, not too religious or heavy, just a way to breathe properly, slow down, and stop blaming yourself for feeling sad. I accepted the book, though I didn't read it right away. Instead, I watched Margaret reading her own life page by page. She no longer hid her sadness, but she didn't let it control her either. She began walking every morning, slowly, without a goal. She drank her tea more slowly, too, never letting it grow cold anymore. She started journaling, not to vent, but as she said, to hear myself more clearly. One day, I asked, "Do you think you're meditating?" She shook her head. "I don't know what proper meditation even is, but this morning, while washing dishes, I wasn't thinking about anything. I just washed, felt the water, heard the clinking of the plates, didn't worry about yesterday, didn't plan for tomorrow. So, is that meditation?" I smiled, and I truly believe that is real meditation. One thing I deeply admire about Margaret is that she didn't try to heal herself with anything flashy. No yoga retreats, no expensive wellness resorts, no dramatic transformations. She simply returned to herself by tending to the small corners of her life. One day I visited and saw her cleaning an old picture frame. It was a photo of her, younger, hugging her 2 children. She said, "I used to avoid these pictures. They made me miss John too much. But today, I looked at this one and smiled because I had happiness, and that still counts." One afternoon, as we sat together under the porch, it suddenly began to rain. She poured tea, then said thoughtfully, "You know, I used to think peace was something huge, like a mountain you had to climb forever to reach. But now, I see peace is just that moment when you stop running. Stop running after people. Stop running from pain. Stop running from loneliness. It's just sitting still, breathing, and realizing I'm still here, and that's already a whole lot." I sat in silence. Her words landed gently but powerfully. I used to think I was the one with life experience, but hearing her say that, I realized some lessons can only be taught by people who've truly known loss. No sermons, no preaching, just truth wrapped in gentleness. We sat quietly. The rain kept falling, but inside me, there was a stillness I hadn't felt in years. I knew then Margaret was beginning to live again, not by denying her pain, but by walking through it with a quiet grace. I started to notice something different about Margaret's backyard. What used to be a patch of scraggly grass had slowly come to life with color. Not as vibrant as a city park, but there were white daisies, clusters of mint and rosemary, and a cherry tomato plant stretching higher each day. "I'm not growing them to eat," Margaret said one afternoon as I dropped by. "I grow them so I can see something still choosing to grow, even when no one told it to." I stood there, holding my cup of hot tea, watching her lean down to gently pick away wilted leaves, and I realized this wasn't just gardening. This was a healing ritual. Not loud, not flashy, just one woman quietly tending to her own life, piece by piece. She told me, "Planting has taught me something. Everything takes time. And the strange thing is, as I care for the plants, I feel cared for too. Not the way others care for you, but the kind where you learn how to be there for yourself." I nodded. I've had my own garden before, but only after hearing her say that did I truly be with it. One day, I saw her writing something under the purple flower trellis. When I asked, she said, "I jot down little things that made me smile each day. Not for anyone to read, just to remind myself that, even after losing so much, life still has pieces worth remembering." She shared a few lines with me. "A sparrow landed on the railing this morning. The tea didn't taste bitter today. The smell of wet soil reminded me of my childhood in rural Iowa." Nothing grand, but I thought, maybe it's these tiny things that are lifting her gently and steadily, like underground springs rising. Margaret also started inviting a few other older neighbors for what she called Saturday afternoon teas. Nothing fancy, just a few homemade cookies, a pot of chamomile, and the laughter and sighs of folks who had lived through most of a lifetime. "We're not here to heal each other," she told me once. "We just listen, and honestly, that's healing enough." I'll never forget one late afternoon, sitting with her, watching the sun go down. I asked, "Do you feel happy these days?" She was quiet. Then after a long pause, she said, "I'm not sure I'd call it happiness, but I'm not afraid of tomorrow anymore. And tonight, I think I'll sleep well." I thought about that. Maybe real happiness, especially for people in their 60s or 70s, doesn't come from adding anything new, but from finally not feeling like anything's missing. I saw myself change too, not because I did anything dramatic, but because I witnessed a woman who had once fallen apart, now calmly living again. One small step at a time, one plant pot at a time, one solo meal, carefully prepared as if someone dear would join her. Sometimes I think we don't need more life advice. We just need life examples, like Margaret. One Sunday morning, I came by Margaret's place earlier than usual. Her door, as always, was open. The smell of toasted bread drifted from the kitchen, and there she was, sitting quietly at the dining table, a cup of tea in hand. She didn't speak, and I didn't rush to break the silence. It was so still. I could hear the spoon tap gently against the cup. I pulled out a chair and sat next to her. "You look different today, even more peaceful than usual." She smiled softly. "I realized something this morning, looking in the mirror. I don't feel like I have to do something anymore just to feel alive. Just sitting here, breathing, is enough." She told me she had a dream the night before. She was standing in a wide, open field. No one else was around, but she didn't feel lonely. In the dream, a voice not tied to any face whispered, "You don't have to go anywhere anymore. You've already arrived." That dream, she said, didn't scare her. In fact, it made her wake up feeling home. When I was younger, I thought peace would come after I'd done enough, fixed enough, suffered enough. But now I see it was always here. I just kept chasing it out there in people, in work, in the future, in the past. Only when I got tired did I finally stop and realized it had never left me. I didn't say anything, and for the first time I understood deeply what letting go really means. Not from books, but from someone who had walked through sorrow, who had struggled, who had been emptied, and still never stopped honoring life. That afternoon, Margaret invited me to visit an old friend with her at a nearby nursing home. She brought a basket of homemade cookies and a few worn books. On the way, she said, "I no longer feel like I'm doing charity like I used to. Now I just want to sit with people, be present with them the way I once wished someone had been with me." I understood. When someone feels full inside, they don't give to fill a void. They give simply because kindness becomes second nature. That day, she and her old friend Mary laughed heartily, read poetry aloud, then sat in stillness as classical music played in the background. I stood outside, peeking through the window, and I swear what I saw felt sacred. Two souls simply being present with each other, alive, aware, at peace. When we got back, Margaret said something I'll never forget. "You know, I don't need people to remember me as strong. I just hope they remember that I knew how to sit still, how to listen, and how to smile to myself." After that day, something in my life got lighter too. Not because I changed careers or learned something new, but because I started doing one small thing, pausing a few minutes each day just to be with myself, kindly. Margaret may never know it, but in her quiet transformation, she became a little lantern, not blazing, but enough to guide someone through a foggy night. Someone like me, and maybe someone like you. If you, the one watching this, are feeling tired, empty, or alone, please remember, peace is not a destination. It's a state that can return any moment if you're willing to stop chasing. You don't have to become someone else. You don't need to do something grand. You just have to return to yourself, to the simplest things: a warm cup of tea, a little plant, a kind glance at your own reflection, and maybe peace will come to you, just like it came to Margaret, quietly, gently, and here to stay.